At its most basic, witchcraft means worship or action on behalf of or worship of the devil. And in early modern Europe, as we know, notions about women were not very advanced. So women were associated with original sin. Women were naturally sinners because Eve was a sinner in the Garden of Eden. Women were felt to be more in touch with nature, and therefore they would be in touch with small animals like cats, mice, etc. These animals were figured in witchcraft imagery. These animals were figured to work with witches, and they were called familiars. They were familiar to witches. So this idea of women being sorcerers and cavorting with the devil is a very powerful one, and we'll see why. This work, Malleus Maleficarum, The Hammer of Witches, written by two German monks, Sprenger and Kramer, on behalf of Pope Innocent, laid the foundation for the witchcraft hysteria in Europe. This pointed out that witches were in the world, witches were ancient agents of the devil, and witches were a serious threat to God. And it was this work that outlined much of the witchcraft hysteria which was to follow. The idea of witches acting in the world was very common among superstitious peasantry. So we have superstitions today, but certainly superstitions had a powerful hold on the early modern mindset. And we saw that when we discussed folk tales. So sometimes there were white witches or cunning folk or cunning women who made positive contributions or were involved in childbirth or helped with medical ailments or could cast a spell to remove a witch's spell. But for the most part, witches were considered a negative force. Witches were blamed for deaths, storms, harvests, problems with animals, animal death, and also in relation to children, we know that children could die for many reasons, and witches were blamed for that. As mentioned, an easy definition of witchcraft is heresy. Heresy is that which is not holy. Heresy is the act of speaking against religion or speaking against the church. So we can see that certainly this image is not holy. We see these women witches cavorting naked, making spells, using animals. Again, they're familiar with animals. We saw in other stories like the cat massacre that cats are considered witches' familiars. Cats can be a representation of Satan. What other animals? Well, how about goats? We see a goat here in this picture. Again, this is heretical actions, unholy actions of witches. But while we focus on the unholy action of witches, we should also look at the practical action of witches. We can see that farmers may have thought that witches made their milk sour, something as simple as that. If an animal died strangely, perhaps a witch was involved. So witches would get blamed for anything, a crop failure, anything agricultural, a crop failure, an animal failure. Here we see an image of the stereotype of witches. Why would there be a stereotype that witches would fly on a broom? Well, if we consider that women used brooms to sweep out their houses, perhaps an elderly, widowed woman who was the perfect stereotype of a witch then would fly around the broom at night. Witches are heretics. Witches are unholy, and we see them here at night under the moon worshipping the devil. The devil is in the shape of a goat here, and that's why sometimes we see a devil with cloved feet, the feet of a goat, or the body of a goat, or horns. This is where the image of Satan came from, as a horned man. Here we see witches, men and women, conducting an unholy or heretical or heresy mass with the devil. And perhaps we see in this image here, you can see just in the center, perhaps they're sacrificing a child to the devil. Is this a child sacrifice here? So perhaps that's why a child died.